The humanitarian crisis in Yemen, caused by armed conflict, is among the worst in the world and has had a devastating toll on children. More than 10,000 children have been killed or injured in the war in Yemen, according to UNICEF. More than 17 million Yemenis are food insecure. This number is projected to reach 19 million. An estimated 2.2 million children under 5 are suffering from acute malnutrition, and of those, more than 500,000 face severe acute malnutrition, which can lead to death without life-saving aid. Conflict has displaced more than 4 million people, of whom nearly 80% are children and women. Millions lack access to basic healthcare, clean water, and sanitation. According to the UN Refugee Agency, 5 million are said to be one step away from famine conditions. War and factionalism have reversed Yemen's human development by more than 20 years, an entire generation lost. Yemen was already a poor country, with 40% of its population living in poverty in 2014. And that's a side question. How is Yemen so poor when it's literally sitting on billions of dollars of oil? Now, an estimated 80% of the population lives below the poverty line. So the question remains, how did we get here? You see, from 1967 to 1990, following a civil war, the country divided into North and South Yemen. In 1990, North and South unified under President Ali Abdullah Saleh, but tensions continued between the North and South. From 2004 to 2010, Houthi rebels controlling the North maintained an insurgency against the central government in the South. Now, I know today the Houthis are in the news because of what's going on in Gaza, but just so you know, the Houthis are just a tribe of Yemeni people who I believe were in the north of Yemen. Now, in 2011, longtime President Ali Abdullah Saleh hands over authority to his Vice President Abda Mansour Hadi in response to the Arab Spring uprising. Hadi, however, is unable to maintain control. In 2014, Yemeni frustration with rampant corruption, unemployment, and rising fuel led to unrest across Yemen, including calls for an independent southern Yemen state. Taking advantage of the situation, the Houthis, a political and armed movement that originated from the Houthi tribe, entered the capital, Sana'a, with the assistance of ex-President Saleh, and put Hadi under house arrest. So Saleh himself put his best mate in power, then he grabs his Houthis and tells them to go and attack his best mate. Huh? And then in 2014, the Iran-backed Houthis take control of Sana'a and the southern seat of the government. In 2015, the President Hadi is forced to flee the country. He ran to Saudi Arabia. So, in 2015, with the goal to put Hadi back in power, Saudi Arabia joined forces with the UAE and formed a coalition of 9 Arab countries. The coalition was backed by the United States, the United Kingdom, France, and Canada. Saudi Arabia framed the conflict in sectarian terms, insisting that Iran was supporting the Houthis. In March 2015, the Saudi-led coalition began conducting airstrikes and imposing a naval blockade against Yemen, indiscriminately targeting civilians and civilian infrastructure. This severely restricted the flow of food, fuel, and medicine to civilians in violation of international humanitarian law. And this begs another question. If I was to strike you on your face and you retaliate by saying, okay, well, I'm now going to block the water to your house. Huh? Again, look at this region. Look at all the money, all the oil available in this region. And this tiny little place, Yemen. Bro, all of these people are sick. Now, the Saudi leaders backed Hadi for many reasons. They were alarmed by the rise of the Houthis at Saudi Arabia's southern border, who they said were backed by Saudi Arabia's main regional competitor, Iran. The Yemen war served the political ambitions of the Saudi defense minister at that time, who today is the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. And by the way, what's going on in Gaza right now is directly his fault. MBS used the Yemen conflict to gain national recognition and consolidate power. Lastly, control over Yemen would allow Saudi Arabia to construct an oil pipeline from its southern border through Yemen's eastern province into the Indian Ocean. The pipeline would ease Saudi Arabia's dependence on shipping oil through the Strait of Hormuz, which borders Iran. Now, I just want to quickly say, I'm going to give my full analysis on all of this at the very end, but for now, as someone who is a practicing Muslim, to see all these Muslims, alright, blessed with this land, again, of vast resources, fighting against each other, it's disgusting. And who suffers? The children. This coalition closed all of Yemen's entry points in response to a missile strike on Saudi's Riyadh airport in 2017. While the coalition eased some restrictions, it continues to prevent much aid and nearly all commercial imports from reaching Houthi-controlled ports, which has an unlawfully disproportionate impact on civilians' access to essential goods. So that's a quick insight into the geopolitics of what's going on. And to add further, Yemen is the poorest country in the Middle East, and it depends heavily on imported food, medicine, and fuel for 80 to 90% of the population. It's reported 7 million people were dependent on food aid to survive, and nearly a million may have cholera. Diphtheria, a disease that should be preventable, was spreading and had already killed more than 20 people and infected nearly 200. Half the country's hospitals have been closed, and nearly 16 million people lack access to clean water. Regarding the fighting itself, in 2017, a battle broke out in Sana'a on December the 1st between the Houthis and formerly allied forces loyal to former President Saleh. Dozens of people, including civilians, were killed and wounded in the fighting. On December the 4th, Houthi forces killed Saleh under circumstances that remain unclear. During the fighting, civilians already facing shortages of essential goods were reportedly rapidly running out of food, fuel, and medicine. Humanitarian organizations were unable to reach their warehouses to deliver aid to those in need. In 2018, separatists, supported by the UAE, seized Aden, the southern main city. In 2019, UN efforts led to a power-sharing agreement between separatists and the Yemen government to end the conflict in southern Yemen. In 2020, progress stalls on troop withdrawals because of mistrust among warring parties. The UN warned that millions of displaced Yemenis are a step away from famine. So as you can see, conflict has plagued Yemen since 2015. With economic collapse, food prices have soared. Again, 17 million people are suffering from hunger and malnutrition. People continue to flee violence. More than 4 million people have been displaced. The volatile security situation makes it difficult to supply aid to people in need. In fact, COVID-19 remained a serious health threat in Yemen, with more than 11,000 confirmed cases and 2,000 deaths. The pandemic took its toll on Yemen's health system, in which only 50% of facilities were functional. The numbers are just more and more damning. 11 million children need life-saving aid. Every 10 minutes, a child under 5 dies in Yemen from preventable causes. At least 26,000 suspected cases of cholera and 29 related deaths were reported in 2021. Schools and hospitals have been damaged and closed. More than 2 million girls and boys were out of school in 21. Now, to conclude, the reason why earlier I said Mohammed bin Salman is the one to blame is because in this entire region, he is the most powerful man, backed by America, has the most money. Some say the Saudi royal family is the richest family in the world. If they're the richest family in the world, right? Let's say that's not true. It still gives you an indication of how rich they actually are. How do they allow Yemen to be one of the poorest places in the world? Look at all these children. What did they do? You know, in the Islamic theology, right, it is believed that the ones with the most capability will suffer the biggest culpability. Meaning, if you're a leader like bin Salman, like Hadi, like Saleh, right, who've basically stolen the money all for themselves, if you're a leader, you have the biggest responsibility. And when you die, you will be put before God, and God will ask, what did you do? Those children will come to you and say, when I was starving, what did you do? Now, many of you may not believe in God. That's okay. I'm trying to give you an indication of the theology in this area. And if you are given the idea that if you do misbehave, you will burn in hell forever, just hypothetically, right? And the fact you still act in this greedy, arrogant way, allowing these children to starve, it tells you the maniacs that run this country. I am disgusted, aren't you?